All right, our topic in lesson 2 is called points, lines, and planes. And what we're attempting to do is to start with geometry. These are 3 objects that you really got to be able to explain, show, describe, because everything else that follows in the geometry curriculum is kind of built on these objects. So let's start by talking about how we're going to describe them, or how we're going to maybe take notes on them. And what I have here is a circle map, and in the middle, notice that I have the word term, and this is going to be the word or the object that we're going to be describing. Now, in the top left box, we're going to give a definition. In the top right box, we're going to show a picture of this term or object. In the bottom left box, give an example of it. And finally, in the bottom right box is what we call notation. Now, notation is, maybe that you're not familiar with that. And really what we mean by notation is what's the symbol that we're going to use to show that. A lot of times what we're trying to do with notation is we're trying to make it easier to describe the object or to show it, so we don't have to write so much. And so anyways, we're going to use a circle map to describe these objects, so let's get into that. Now in the top left box, we're going to take the object of what we call a point. Now a point is simply an exact location. Here would be a picture of a point. Notice that I have the dot, and then I have an A next to it, saying, hey, this is point A. Now when we show a point, or when we label a point, you always use a capital letter. So notice that the A is capitalized. Now what are some real world examples of maybe some points? Well, maybe a point on a map. If you look at the map of the United States or a map of Iowa, Eldora would be a point on that map. Or say in our math classroom, a certain student sitting in a chair, that's a certain point in the room. Now the notation, or how would we describe a point? The notation is there is no symbol for a point. We simply write the word point and then A with describing it. Now the next object that we're going to describe is a line. Now a line, by definition, is a set of points. So for example, if I drew a line here, and that's a line, right? But what is a line consist of? Well, it consists of a lot of points. And if I kept on marking these points in, pretty soon everything's going to fill in and I'm going to have a line. Now technically a line does not end. We need to have the arrows at the end. A line does not end. Some things do not end. And that's sometimes hard for us to understand because we're used to things starting and ending. For example, the universe is something that doesn't end. It keeps on going and going. Now, a picture of a line might be this. So notice I have 2 points on the line, the dots. I have the arrows at the end, and this would show a line. Now, maybe a real world example of a line would be a straight road. So you're standing on a road, you look to your left, and the road just keeps on going straight, and it keeps on going, you don't see an end to it. And you look to the right, and you have the same situation. Now we know that eventually the road would end, but technically a line does not end. Now how do we describe or show a line? What's our notation? Well, you write the points that are on the line, A and B. Notice A and B are on the line. And notice they're capitalized. And then above the A and B, we write this symbol, the line symbol, arrows at the end. So if you don't have the arrows, that could completely mean something else. Very important to pay attention to the detail on that. Now a plane is simply a number of points making a flat surface. So maybe this screen that you're looking at is a plane. A plane is a flat surface, and technically a plane keeps on going in all directions. Maybe your desktop, that would be a plane because it's a flat surface. The only difference, though, if it were a true plane, the the desk wouldn't end at the edges. It'd keep on going for in all directions. Now, when we show a picture of a plane, we usually use a leaning rectangle or a parallelogram. And then to name the plane, we use a capital letter in the corner. As far as notation, we don't have a symbol for plane. We just write the word plane and then the capital letter. Now, collinear points are simply points on one line. So in other words, if I look at the picture that I have on the top right, notice that points A, B, C, and D are all on the same line. So they're collinear. Collinear means points all line on the same line. But if I ask you, are A, B, C, D, and E collinear? No. They're not all collinear because E is off the line. Are points C, D, and E collinear? No, because E is off that line. Are points B, C, and D collinear? Yes, because they're on the same line. Maybe a real-world example would be in your classroom where you have a row of desks. You know, you have the row going straight back. And so in other words, all the students in that row are collinear because they lie in the same row. Now, as far as notation, really don't have any symbol or anything for collinear points. Now, last definition are coplanar points. They're points on the same plane. So notice in the picture that I have to the right here, I have plane M, and then I have points A and B on it. Now, A and B are coplanar because they lie in the same plane. But A, B, and C are not coplanar because C is off the plane. Maybe in your math classroom, the floor would be a plane. So in other words, all the chairs on that floor are coplanar because they're in the same room, they're on the same floor. But if you had all the chairs in the math room and then a chair sitting out in the hallway, well, the hallway is a different floor or different plane, so they would not be coplanar. And as with coplanar points, we really don't have a symbol for those. So what we've done here is we've talked about points, lines, and planes and described and gave definitions of those.